Hi everyone, on today's podcast I have the pleasure of speaking with Terence Moriarty, a Killarney native. It was really lovely to catch up with Ter. Ter is an assistant professor of exercise physiology at the University of Iowa, which is one of America's premier public research universities. Ter studied sports and exercise sciences at University of Limerick here in Ireland. From there then he went on to do his master's in exercise physiology at Michigan University and on to do his doctoral training at the University of New Mexico, and is now working as an assistant professor at the University of Northern Iowa. We talk about exercise physiology and its important role in our mental health and well-being, some of the research he and his team have been doing in this area, and the important role of exercise in the aging process, and also its role in the recovery and the prevention of many diseases. Really hope you enjoy it. Tara, maybe just to kick us off, could you start maybe by telling us a little bit about possibly what's inspired you maybe to follow this path that you're currently on, that maybe has led you to currently being an assistant professor in exercise physiology? Tara, for people that would know, Tara grew up pretty close to me, a stone's throw really. And I know your father would have been a massive sports person. He loved all types of sports. So we might just start there, Tara, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose growing up, like you said, growing up close to all of you guys, sport was like a huge area of your life, and luckily for me, I suppose playing soccer all the way through until I left for the US, I suppose in 2013, we were pretty decent. Played sport at a high enough level. And yeah, through school, kind of got involved in exercise science in Limerick, and in combination with the sport or exercise, I suppose I was kind of a it's kind of a weird way to describe it, and I describe it to some students here is that kind of a nerd in some ways, right? I like school, where my two older brothers, they might give me a dead arm for this, but they didn't really like school, like they maybe. Well, for whatever reason at that age, they weren't too invested in it. I just enjoyed it, getting up every morning and doing homework after school. It was weird. I loved it. And that kind of combination, I suppose, of school and then exercise or sport kind of led me to UL and after all the way after it.
Yeah, I've actually a young person at the moment coming to me, well, relatively young. I keep getting older, see. So he's in UL, actually. He's studying what you studied. And I think he'd be super excited to see where you are today. Like, I think it'll be very inspiring for him. Obviously, you're a massive sports person. Like, I know I was going to say athletic to mess, but it's a Celtic man, Terrace, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
A big Celtic man, a big Celtic man. Ter, I suppose, look, I know you've done like a lot of what you're doing at the moment is kind of teaching. You're doing an awful lot of research. Maybe the next question possibly around, actually, could you explain a little bit about what exercise physiology, what it is like, and why it's important and its relevance maybe to overall health, and I suppose my interest in being specifically mental health as well,
Yeah, so I suppose to start on exercise physiology, it's more like described as like how the human body reacts to the stimulus of exercise, from like heart rate to blood pressure to blood flow, like all those different variables physiologically. What happens then when we give somebody the stimulus of exercise. And of course, it depends on the intensity of exercise that we program or provide them with, that will also influence those variables. Then as regards kind of health, I guess this is kind of a huge topic that I kind of sum up in three words really, and that's like exercise is medicine. There's a huge initiative here, and I'm not sure about home in Ireland now, but it's the Exercise is Medicine initiative, like across all kind of campuses, and just out in the community, that the influence exercise can have, and not only physical health, not only weight loss and things that most of us already know about, but the mental aspect of health also, and how it can improve it in little time. You kind of get a big bang for your buck, and you don't have to put in too much.
And like it's really looking at that kind of green prescription in a way, like, you know what I mean? That and for you, really, I mean, what you do up as, and you probably wouldn't say it like this, but it's you're basically a doctor who prescribes, whose medicine is prescribing exercise to treat whatever the ailment or illness or whatever might be going on for the person.
Exactly across populations. And I think we kind of touched on this, but like a lot of people out there, I suppose, not a lot, but some certainly have, you know, the cookie cutter kind of approach whereby, oh, it's this sets, it's this reps, it's this rest time, or for aerobic exercise, for walking or running, oh, it's 30 minutes a day back to the school and back, you know, that kind of that kind of thing. That's
get in your 10,000 steps. Yeah,
which is good, right?
Yeah.
It's not that I would ever diss that. I always give people a clap on the back if they're exercising, engaging in any respect. It's just, if you take it to the next level, like the next step would be then like, well, what about the intensity at which you're walking back to the school, or you know, what influence can that have on whatever you're trying to achieve, I suppose.
You've done, obviously, a lot of what you do is research. You've done some research in relation to CBT, the effectiveness of kind of CBT and exercise for depression. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that piece of research that you've done, maybe some of the findings and the outcomes of it? You know, because obviously, you know, depression is such a big thing now, and like you said, people can get a huge bang for their buck, you know, when you look at exercise as part of that treatment. Like,
yeah, I was kind of going back this morning, actually. We have a couple of review articles, and they kind of govern the same point, I suppose, that you know, going back 50, 60, 70 years, it was kind of just the treatment, you know, just, oh, go and find some type of psychosocial therapy or whatever help or interview, or, you know more than that from that perspective. And then we kind of introduced, I think, the therapy and maybe some medicine, you know, take these pills and go to the therapist, and maybe that will help. And then I think from around the 70s onward, we started, you know, seeing the benefits of exercise and how they might maybe, you know, improve the number of sessions somebody's doing, or following the therapy. Maybe it keeps the person, you know, less depressed or more engaged in the active lifestyle that they've learned to engage in. So I think that's kind of one nice area that we've tried to get into, is the combination of exercise with, you know, some type of therapy. Is there going back to the same kind of phrase, is there a better bang for your buck if somebody's maybe engaging in 20 minutes of walking prior to seeing you as a therapist, or whoever they're going to, you know? Are they taking in the information a little bit more because they're a little bit more receptive in areas of the brain, or whatever that might be? And I think depression's obviously huge, as you mentioned. It's similar for that, you know, similar for all those types of you know, diseases or dysfunctions in whatever area of the brain that it pertains to. And I think, again, for us, then it's nailing down exercise prescription for that. You know, if you're in this population of people, how should you exercise in general, or maybe does it help you if you do it prior to some type of treatment?
Yeah, and of course, like, you know, your prescription obviously then has to be very varied in relation to, like, if you're treating someone that's 80 or 90 and maybe they have osteoporosis, or you're treating the ultra athlete who is dealing with tendinitis. I mean, your prescription is extremely varied, like, you know, isn't it? And
yeah, and even it was kind of really interesting. My dissertation in Albuquerque and at University of New Mexico just a couple of years ago was with cardiac patients, right? So cardiovascular disease patients, a lot of them would come in like a number of weeks after, let's say, a heart attack. And the prescription, you know, is 12 weeks of exercise, but I would do like pre and post testing on them. So at the beginning, like, I would try and pinpoint how fit they were. Now you can imagine, like, after like a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, the individual is probably not going to be able to walk that long or that of high an intensity.
Yeah.
So you would see people like, and it's kind of, it's eye-opening to see people, you know, as young as 40. I had a guy in the study who was, I think, around 37, and then all the way to like, 90 years old, and getting up on the treadmill and doing like a submaximal test. And these people are getting to like 2.2 miles an hour, 2.8 miles an hour, which is their kind of max, or where they're seeing a hard exertion, where for us, or for the average healthy person of the same age, it's probably like treble that, quadruple that kind of capacity. So then, like, it's cool to see the prescription then for that individual. Like, they're coming from such a low cardiovascular capacity. How do you prescribe exercise over 12 weeks, and how do you monitor them to ensure that they're, not going to have another event? So yeah, and then we looked at areas of the brain and stuff pre and post, and how cognition could change for those people as well.
Could you actually talk a little bit about that? Actually, maybe about that, of maybe what you saw pre and post the research piece, in relation to maybe cognitive functioning. And I suppose the brain needs constant oxygen, constant glucose, and maybe what's the importance of that really, and how does that kind of transfer into, I suppose, the muscles being pumped full of oxygen? If you can explain that a little bit, because that's okay.
Yeah, so I suppose it's kind of cool to like set the scene that for those people, right, they've had some type of dysfunction to the heart, or it's not working as it should be. And what we think happens, or one kind of avenue that might be true, is that they get reduced blood flow to the brain, right? So if they get reduced blood flow, basically it's not as well functioning as the healthy person. So this like prefrontal cortex right here, if it's not getting as much blood as it should be, it's not functioning properly, and then it has an effect in kind of this area is like more executive functioning. So kind of, that memory and planning and decision making, it kind of governs that. So for those people, then, those areas are not as well functioning as the healthy person. So what we think happens with exercise, then, giving them that 12 weeks prescription, is that we can increase the amount of blood getting there, we can increase the activation, and then we can see differences in that. They have better decision making, they have better memory, they have better planning, whatever it might be. And yeah, we saw both of those things. So we did a 6-week study. I didn't have time actually to do 12 weeks for my dissertation, so I cut it in half.
You got away with that one.
Yeah, it took some kind of Irish slang to get away with it.
No better buckle.
Yeah. But yeah, we did pre-testing. So we went in and did that like submaximal test, a couple of minutes on the treadmill. We did like a cognitive test on the iPad, and we have this device that measures oxygen in this area of the brain. And then basically they gave them the 6 weeks of exercise, and then came back after 6 weeks and did the exact same post test, and saw increases in cardiovascular capacity, increases in fitness, increases in the cognitive test. So they did better on the iPad. It was about 25 minutes of cognitive testing, and then they had increased activation of that area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex,
which is amazing. And like, what are the kind of, maybe the percentages of kind of improvement there would you kind of have seen, and that you can kind of identify? Or I mean, I'm sure that's varied, but is there certain?
Yeah, that's a really good so I think the best stat that I could give you is that for every metabolic equivalent, which is basically like at rest, you're consuming about 1 metabolic equivalent. Like we are sitting here right now about 1 met. Like at maximal exercise for them, I think they were at on average about 5 mets, which is it's really low. Like I'm sure if you did a maximal exercise test, you'd probably get to maybe 13, 14, 15 mets. So for every 1 met that you increase in fitness level, you basically decrease your chance of getting some type of cardiac condition or mortality or dying by about 15%. And in that study, for those people, they're beginning so low, like 5 mets is really low. They, on average, I think the average increase was about 1.4 mets in 6 weeks, so over 6 weeks of exercise, about 3 times a week, they hit about 18 sessions. basically, in essence, you can take it away that they're decreasing their risk of dying by about 15%.
Oh my God, like that is staggering statistic.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And like, you know, if we can go back a little bit just to maybe the person that's had a heart attack, you know, possibly, actually, do you know, when you talked about that, my uncle had to get open heart surgery. It's a couple of years back now, but, you know, until he had gotten that, I never really thought too much about the procedure, but you're lying there, they cut you open, they take out your heart, they put it on the table beside you, and they operate and they put it back in. And like, it's like, oh my God, like to save the number one that you can do that. And he's flying, and he plays golf, and I'd say he'll be back playing it pretty soon now once they have restrictions. I think it's a week or two they can go back playing golf. But like, you know, when you measure them after that, you know, and maybe you've looked at what their aerobic capacity is, like, are you trying to target then a certain aerobic capacity for them to get to over a certain duration of time? You know, when you're maybe looking at the prescription side of it, I suppose, as such.
Probably not. I think most people will respond slightly differently to the stress of the exercise, you know, the kind of increments in exercise.
Yeah.
And I guess it also depends on like where the person starts, because, you know, the 50-year-old who might have been exercising prior to this event, you know, might start at a higher intensity than the 90-year-old who hasn't been, or whatever. But yeah, and like going back to what you said about the kind of heart surgery there, yeah, it's wild what they can do now. It's kind of a bit far removed from this talk, but yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
It is. It's unbelievable. I just wanted to just a couple of studies there. Just popped out there. I was looking at it there the other day, but there's 11 research studies show that exercise can significantly reduce the risk of developing dementia by 30%. And reduces the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 45%. And they're looking at that in the kind of exercising in relation to kind of midlife, I suppose. I'm nearly there. So yeah, Terry, you're a good bit younger, dude. But like, isn't that just crazy statistics? Like,
yeah, it's wild, you know. And I think where I go with that is like trying to get across the point to like students here and everybody you would meet, just the importance or the value you can get from just exercising, you know, 30 minutes a day is whatever. You can do the math after, but it's 2% a day or whatever it is of your 24 hours. And the improvements you can get for that. And I think, you know, a couple of other staggering things, like in the US, I think the number of adults now overweight or obese, granted it's on the BMI scale, but it's about 70%, 7 in 10 individuals over 18 are either overweight or obese on the BMI scale. Now, BMI has its own limitations, but
yeah.
You know, still that's
still a good predictor. Yeah.
You know, so even, and that tells you that like people can't be engaging in the exercise that they're supposed to be if those stats are out there.
And the knock-on effect that has then to people's kind of mental well-being, you know, they're just, I think there's, you know, I talk a lot about mental health, obviously, but just feeling good, like, you know, you're just feeling happy and content, you know, it definitely has an extremely negative impact. As people are getting a little bit older, obviously kind of osteoporosis is something that would happen sort of naturally as well as people are getting older. But like, is there, you know, when you look at aerobic exercise, you look at kind of resistant training, do people need to kind of maybe look at, when we're getting a little bit older, types of exercise actually that we do, and maybe to improve things like bone density and that sort of thing? Is that things that, you know, you would, you know, obviously teach and talk about and stuff like that? And
yeah, absolutely. Even this morning, I teach at 8 a.m. this morning, and we have I had one slide that was really cool about just the heart muscle itself and how it adapts or changes to resistance training on one side of the screen and then aerobic training on the other. So like primarily with aerobic training, you'll see an increase in one of the chambers, the left ventricle. You'll see an increase in the size of the left ventricle. And basically all that does, it's fairly simple. All that it does is, it's like comparing, you know, a 2-gallon bucket to a 4-gallon bucket. If after aerobic training, the bucket, the chamber of the left ventricle is now 4 gallons, it fills with more blood, and you can move more blood to the muscle, to the periphery, right? That's great, right? That kind of, and on the other side with resistance training, specifically to the heart, the size of the left ventricle wall, the wall thickness, the muscle thickness increases with resistance training. That's kind of the way we think that it happens, and with the increase in thickness, that allows for a stronger contraction, just like a bicep being stronger or larger. And again, that will push more blood to the periphery. Now, going back to kind of what you asked about, yeah, I think you do have to tailor the exercise, especially as somebody grows older. Probably where we don't get as much as we maybe should have. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the osteoporosis, is the resistance kind of aspect. I think usually older people, they do their walking. If they engage in something, it's usually aerobic in nature.
Yeah, especially, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, no, especially as you're older, I think, yeah, isn't it? Like my mom now, for instance, she'd walk twice a day, but she wouldn't really do any resistance training. But it's definitely, like, it's always important to some degree, but it's definitely really important, isn't it? Now, I know a lot of strength and conditioning when people are attending certain gyms, and even many of the gyms in Killarney, which are great, but kind of they do have classes for older people, will incorporate a lot of resistance training. But it's definitely something, as people are getting older, that it's important to look at. And maybe very specifically, why is that important, for people when they're getting a little bit older, maybe to kind of consider that sort of resistant training as well as part of your kind of weekly routine or your exercise regime?
I think you just, it's kind of as simple as activating the muscle and keeping the muscle and bone in fairly healthy shape, that you can do the movements of daily living with no undue stress. Just like if you load a muscle or load a bone from resistance training, it's only going to grow stronger. So it makes activities of daily living then, when you're older, just a little bit easier. You reduce the risk of falls and injuries and so on. And just to kind of, to your point again about that, the importance of it, I think, I thought about my mother too when you brought it up, like older, yeah, loves to walk.
Don't say that. I made that mistake not that long ago.
Okay.
My mother didn't like that.
Cut that one out. You told me you could cut out.
Helen is a very young woman. I'll have to call and see her. She's lovely.
But yeah, engage in more aerobic, and probably just don't know or have never been taught how to engage in maybe resistance. And when people think about it, if they're not maybe as educated, or they haven't, taken these classes, or they can't afford it, which is absolutely normal, how easy it actually might be. You could do just body weight movement at home, that is probably, if not more effective than, you don't have to be under a bar, you don't have to have 40-pound dumbbells, you could have 2-liter Moriarty bottles, or you could be doing body weight squats, or modified push-up, whatever it might be, and that'll almost give you the same impact as what some people might think as lifting heavy weight.
Yeah, because like some of the biggest risks as people are getting older are having falls and brittle bones, and like something like possibly breaking a hip can have extremely detrimental, and sometimes it is it can be very detrimental for some people. So like having stronger bone structure is so important for people. But it's really interesting just to hear the difference of what cardiovascular training would do and resistant training would do just for the muscle of the heart, and I don't think that's something that too many people would be familiar with, and how the two together actually can really help you to have a strong heart. Obviously helps pump the blood into the other essential organs of the body. So it's really, really incredible, and it's more about education, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And like, not to get into kind of a teaching thing, but you even think about like diabetes there, and we could go across, like you say, across all or whatever, the exercise is medicine. When you exercise, basically you kind of activate a protein in the muscle that helps glucose into the cell. But it's really simple now.
Mm.
So when you think about diabetes, there's just excess glucose in the blood. So when you exercise, you remove the glucose from the blood and you move it into the muscle to be used. So you reduce the blood glucose, which is what the diabetic wants to do,
Okay. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. There's a common sort of thread with people sometimes that present and are struggling. There's a couple of things, and there's often reasons as to why people really struggle with kind of implementing things like exercise and good self-care. But when people are struggling with mental health, or they're just high levels of stress, it's often things like you can see that there might be poor lifestyle choices have been prevalent for a long period of time. Maybe people aren't eating well, maybe people aren't exercising regularly enough, and like these have a hugely negative impact on people. Short term maybe not so much, but long term can have a huge impact upon people. What's a typical day for kind of an exercise physiologist?
I guess
Very varied, I'd imagine.
Yeah, varied, I guess, on the day. It depends. Now I do this sleep deprivation study in the morning, so a couple of mornings a week I'd be here at 5 or so. Usually.
So you're sleep deprived.
Yeah, probably by now. That's not every morning, but
yeah.
Usually I try and exercise in the morning before teaching, before 8. Cool. And then it kind of varies, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday are kind of my teaching days. So I would teach for 3 or 4 hours on Friday, a few more hours, building your PowerPoints and ensuring they're good to go for the next day. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, usually I try and keep it for more research or meetings. We have some service to the university, like departmental meeting. We have one today. But yeah, you definitely get your 40 hours, if not more.
Very good. What kind of training are you doing at the moment, Tara?
Playing more soccer actually now.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I started playing indoor about 15 or 20 minutes away with a group of Bosnians, and
oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, you've been kind of big into running the marathons over the last couple of years as well. You've done the Boston Marathon a couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, I did Chicago in 2018. Yeah, I wouldn't say big by any. Yeah, I'm not really a distance runner. I guess I just got into it for that and raised some money for the American Cancer Society. That's kind of why I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll run again in October, I think.
Very good, very good. We have to mention you just bought a new home.
Yep, bought a new home here about 10 minutes away in Iowa. So
very exciting, very exciting. Yeah, you settling in okay?
Yeah, we're doing good. Yeah, we're. I think Amazon has been hit nearly every day for something.
Yeah, a great service gets out pretty quick. Tara, before we maybe kind of look at finishing up, can we talk a little bit about mindset? I know it's something that you've been interested in. Not too sure how much it comes into the kind of maybe the teaching and stuff like that, but we might just touch on the importance of mindset for people and stuff like that, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would kind of go with the mindset from more of an exercise standpoint, like maybe, and I see it here like a lot, like you mentioned at the beginning, growing up at home and being out in the fields with a ball and running around, and you're kind of, I don't know, when you grow up in Ireland like that, you're accustomed to exercise and playing sport. You'll kind of do anything to win, it's a high intensity of exercise. Not so much in the US, like when intensities start getting high and people are in that kind of feeling like at high intensity, nobody likes being there, right? Like, and I think that's when the mindset comes in. You see people who can kind of like go to the next level almost from the high to the maximal exertion, and the other people will just be like, I'm done at the high intensity, I'm kind of sick of it. And yeah, we have a lot of athletes here, and I ran some of them on like maximal exercise tests, and you see they're just made of something different, like 13, 14 miles an hour on a treadmill, just and able to, and even after that, they're saying
sustain that, like
yeah, sustain that for a number of
Yeah.
minutes, and then when you get them to max or whatever, when the test stops, they're still like, oh geez, I could have went more. Or like they're hungry for more. There's one basketball guy there. He's probably going to the NBA. Lovely guy. And I said to him once about his sister. His sister plays here too. She's a good basketball player, I said. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, but she has a lot to work on. And he wasn't joking. You know, he was just like the mindset is the next level. What can we do something else to improve or work on that will make us better?
Incredible. How maybe when you're looking at giving prescriptions of exercise for people, how do you look at kind of supporting them in relation to mindset and stuff like that? It's obviously something that would come up, and kind of keeping them motivated and that sort of thing, because that can be a struggle, obviously, for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you'd kind of check in with them as much as you can in whatever social realm you can, text message or whatever it might be that you have set up, or Zoom now.
Yeah.
I think over the last year, you know, we even hope to do another study here with obese people that we'll do it on Zoom with them, so we can do the exercises, count their reps and stuff. But yeah, any simple way like that, if we can, of course, be one-on-one with them, that's a good way to keep the mindset ticking over and keep the positive kind of vibes going for them, that, you know, you're putting in the hard work. And sometimes I think in the early stages, it's really difficult for people, you know, like if you're trying to lose weight, you know, in the first week or two, you kind of have to explain that, you know, maybe it'll take a little bit longer than that, but trust in what you're doing, that there are changes going on in your body that you'll see eventually or down the road. So yeah, anyway, like that, I think, to keep the positive vibes going.
That's one of the most difficult things, I think, for people. It's that, like, you know, maybe sometimes they, you know, it's like come January, you know, every year people have the best intentions. They're joining the gym, you know, they want to become the best version of themselves. They want to become a more fitter version of themselves, a healthier version of themselves, and they genuinely mean it. But it's the problem often that kind of people are faced with, and even when I'm working with people, sometimes in relation to kind of making changes, in relation to kind of improving their own mental health, it's starting it often is kind of the easy part. It's sort of sustaining it for people is really difficult, and it is like people are trying to develop a new identity as such, you know, so it's new healthy habits. So trying to keep them motivated often is something that's a huge factor in that, isn't it? And I'm sure it's the same when you're you know, in relation to your work and stuff.
Yeah, motivation is absolutely key, like that, like 100%. And I think with the exercise portion, I kind of try and tell people that it's more about the long run than the kind of shorter term. Like, you know, sometimes you'll see people go out and they might expect change very fast or something like that, but you kind of have to be like, you know, just trust the process and kind of think about in a number of months or a number of years down the road that here's where you will be. And it's yeah, at the start, I think it's probably the hardest. Like by February and March, you see that there's nobody in the gym, you know, and you have every machine to yourself. But yeah, I think it's kind of the motivation and mindset that just trust it, and down the road you'll get the benefits.
Yeah, you get the reward there, and it's really, really worth it. Ter, real pleasure in speaking to you, buddy. And thanks so much for coming on. We'll definitely do this again. What's ahead of you now for the rest of the day? Yeah, you busy day?
Yeah, I teach for a couple of more hours and a couple of.
Good stuff. Ter, come here, buddy. Best of luck with the new home. Really happy for you. Lovely new adventure. And look, we'll chat again sometime.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, man.
Lovely, buddy. Thank you.